Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and devoted homemaker. Join me on this journey as we explore the beauty of slow and simple living, where life unfolds at its own unhurried pace. I'll take you through my experiences of slowing down, tending to our allotment plot, finding joy in the little things and making the most of our small home. Together we'll learn to live in harmony with the ever-changing seasons, discovering the magic that lies in embracing the present moment. So let's embark on this enriching adventure towards a more intentional and fulfilling life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, and if you're new here, welcome. I know I say it every time, but welcome to today's podcast. And if you're not new here, of course, welcome as well. So today I want to dive into harvesting and kind of the end of growing season. Now, some people might be like, no, I grow through the winter. I'm not that girl, I'm afraid. I am about the rest. And you know what? I say this in my gardening, and also I run a little allotment club for my kids and some of their home educated friends, and the same thing applies there. We have done allotment club from March through to the end of October. It's when we'll finish. And yeah, I have particularly said that November to February we will just take some time off, and that's because that is how I run my gardening life. I know you can do winter veg, I know, and some of my stuff is obviously still going through the winter. I know some people do like winter salads and stuff, but for me it's really important that sort of end of October, early November, I am winding things up, and I have been spending the autumn sort of prepping and tidying up and getting ready to put the allotment and the balcony to bed for winter. And so yeah, to me the rest is important, and I think it's important for me to rest. I think growing season can be really full on, particularly spring, and because often I've really tried to pace myself better this year, because I tend to just get a bit of burnout, and wasn't perfect but essentially I think it's really important to weave that rest in, and to just have time where the ground can rest, where nature can rest, and where I can rest. And I mean, let's be honest, that's what late autumn and winter is all about in nature anyway. But today I wanted to talk about harvest and the balcony, the allotment, and how that all ties in with seasonal cooking. And I don't know about you, if you're a gardener as well, but for me I find it is so deeply satisfying harvesting, even if it's just a handful of herbs from my balcony, or some really tiny carrot or parsnip that I've pulled from the allotment. It feels like such a reward, and just this reminder that all that work we put in months ago did matter. And I know we joke all the time, like, I've done all this work and you know, I've essentially spent all this money, and yeah, it would have been cheaper for me to go and buy it from the shops, but that's not the point, is it? It's not the point. And today I want to talk about that harvest, and not just in the traditional, you know, sprawling farm countryside sense, but in the kind of harvest that happens in really small places, on balconies, in containers, in allotment plots, in small gardens. And I want to talk about growing in autumn, and how, you know, there's still an abundance to be found this time of year as we start to harvest. And I want to talk about what we do with the food, the seasonal cooking, the preserving, the eating, and the rituals around that nourishment that tie us to this time of year. So I want to start with small space growing, because if you've followed me for any length of time, you will know that my growing space isn't huge, and I gardened exclusively on my 1 metre by 4 metre balcony for 5 years until I applied and got my allotment plot. And so my balcony is, like I said, quite small. It's 1 metre by 4 metres. I actually think that's quite a good size, to be honest. I think that's bigger than some balconies. But I'm on the second floor, so I'm away from ground frost. It does in the depths of winter things still freeze, of course, but it's still very subject to wind is probably the worst. It's not too shaded. I am southwest facing. I get a lot of sun in the summer, and I don't get a lot of pests. I did get some aphids this year. I did find a snail, actually. That guy must have been walking for a while, and so we got him onto a container, and I made my husband take him all the way back down to put him on a leaf. So yeah, that poor guy. I mean, I guess there's a possibility he was dropped by a bird, right? But if he didn't, and if he really did climb up and made it through, then wow, I'm sorry I then took you all the way back down after all that hard work. But yeah, I have been growing on the balcony, like I said, exclusively for 5 years, and this was my 8th season. Was it my 8th season or my 9th season? I think it might have been my 9th season, actually. And I'm still doing it. I'm still pulling food from my balcony. In fact, every year I become more excited and more intentional. Now, I love my allotment, and we're going to talk about that in a bit, but there is something that I get from my balcony that I do not get from my allotment, and I've been pondering this over this last growing season. Why, when I have the allotment, do I still bother? Because there are sometimes, particularly sort of like midsummer onwards, really, from like, I guess, mid to end of July, when everything is suddenly growing quite big, because I did particularly did a massive cucumber plant this year, but also did quite a lot of varieties of tomatoes, and you all know that they all grow quite big. So all of these cute, delicate plants that I planted in the spring, they got really big. And there was a time where I was like, why do I do this to myself every year, where actually it's really difficult for me and Ray, my husband, to actually sit out here, because we were sitting out eating one night, and yeah, suddenly like I kept like scratching the back of my head like something was crawling on me, but it was actually like the leaf of one of the tomato plants. But I think what keeps pulling me back year after year after year, when I don't have to technically use my balcony, do I? I don't have to. But I think what pulls me back is the challenge of it. I like that it's a small space. I like that that's kind of what I'm known for, that growing in that small space. And I just really enjoy it, and I like the challenge, and I like to see what I can grow. I really like to be able to say, like, I grew black kale in a hanging balcony pot this year. I grew beetroot in a hanging balcony pot. I have done peas, I have done beans, I have done so many different varieties of tomatoes. I've done every herb you can possibly imagine. I've done lettuce, I've done spinach, I've done potatoes, I've done onions. You name it, I have given it a try on the balcony, and I just love it. There is something about it that I just really love, and it's not about growing everything, and it's obviously not about growing at scale, but it's about growing something. And you know, autumn still has it. It is still going, and we're still getting the last bits out, and so I think this time of year is where we shift our focus. And you know, the summer growing things are finished or finishing up, and it's squash time. And in autumn, I've still got some of the more hardy things, the greens, the brassicas, the root veg. And if you're a balcony gardener or container gardener, you know, now is a great time to get your hands on like kale, perpetual spinach, chard, beetroot, turnips, and as long as your pots are deep enough, that is fine. And because these crops, they don't mind the colder temperatures. In fact, many of them thrive in them, and a little frost is often said to make kale a bit sweeter. So if, like me, you're working with a vertical space, don't forget hanging baskets, shelves. I have a lot of hanging pots on my balcony, and you've got autumn herbs like parsley, thyme, chives, and even coriander likes a bit of cooler weather and can thrive quite well into the season. And so while I say I do like the break of the allotment, I am a summer gardener at the allotment, where I can kind of extend the season a little more on my balcony, which is fine because there's a lot to do. An allotment is a lot of hard work. And I would say I definitely didn't realise how much hard work it is. I think a lot of people don't realise how much hard work it is unless you have an allotment, you know, the perpetual cycle. Like, there's no way of really knowing. But yeah, I would say maybe I garden a little longer on the balcony, and certainly with things like herbs that like a bit cooler weather, I sort of keep them sheltered and going as long as I really can. But that's my balcony. Let's also talk about my allotment, because my plot is scruffy. It's my scruffy little haven. It's definitely not perfect. It's not pristine. Sometimes I look around at like other people and I just think, oh gosh, like they look so much better than me. But it is ours. And a couple of years ago I did get told off by the council because it rained consistently from about January till April. There was not a weekend that didn't have rain. It just didn't happen. And so it was really impossible to get there, and I got told off by the council because I wasn't cultivating. To which I replied in my email, I don't know when you expect me to go, guys. I don't know when you're expecting me to cultivate, because, you know, some of us have jobs, you know, lives, etc. Not all of us are retired. Not all of us can like drop everything at a whim and just go to the allotment for the 3 minutes that the sun shined that year. And, you know, I said it's not really fair, because he did come back and say, well, people at our other some of our other sites have already started cultivating. And I said, fine, but you can't judge us all by the same yardstick, because some of us have jobs, some of us home educate, some of us are raising children. And, you know, I feel like sending me a letter at the beginning of April saying you haven't done enough. It's a little early in the season. Anyway, I did get no such letter this year. I did send my council a fairly long message about the ways I garden and why it's important, and you know, why it's important not to be standing on the soggy soil that's clay based where I live in April. When it's raining, it's very important that the soil structure is not disturbed. So anyway, I was on the good list this year, let's say. So like I say, it is scruffy, but autumn at the allotment, it feels like it's winding down. All of the big harvests are mostly done, and yeah, the tomatoes are pretty much done. I have some beans drying out on the vine. I've got squash that's ready to store. All of my root crops are pretty much, you know, ready. And this is the time where we sort of harvest the last things that we're not going to leave. We dig over the soil. Now, I know a lot of people do no dig. I actually, you know, I do a bit of both. I do some no dig in some of my beds, and I actually dig others. So last autumn, so for many years, my granddad told me that, so he was a very, very keen gardener. We lost my granddad last November. He was a very keen gardener, and he would help me out tons. He would give me so many tips. I would always think, you know, my granddad was 89 when he died last year. I used to see him every week, and we would always talk about gardening, especially through growing season. And he could obviously do less and less, but he did enjoy spending time at the allotment with us as well. And he definitely helped me get it set up, and I learned a lot from him. But for many years, he would always say to me, you need to dig over in the autumn. You know, he's a very traditional gardener. He didn't do things like no dig. He would always say to me that his dad had a couple of allotment plots, and he would talk to me about digging over the soil in the autumn. And I was always like, yeah, you know, like we do. We always think we know better. Dig over the soil in the autumn and it will be better for you in the spring. Now, obviously, this is not in my no-dig beds. This was in the beds that I do dig and turn over. And last year I was like, do you know what? And this was before he passed away as well. Kind of kind of irony, I guess, that I never got to tell him, like, oh, you were right. That really did work, because I turned the beds over in the autumn. I don't know, maybe October time. I turned the beds over in the autumn time. So he did know at least that I'd done it. So I guess he would have been pleased about that. But then he passed away in November. So I never got to, when I got to the spring and I realised, actually, that works much better than just abandoning them after the harvest. And so I never got to tell him that, well, that really worked. So I'm telling you guys, it really worked. But yeah, so this is the sort of time of year that we do dig over the beds that we dig, and we just get everything prepared for winter, store things, get things prepared, just organised. I have this tendency, and I've done it again this year, I did it last year, and I've probably done it every year since I've had the allotment, is that I just abandon things in the greenhouse after a certain point and then they just die. Not much, when I've got like no space and we start getting like heat, and then I can't maintain them and I haven't got them out, and then I've got a few pots that are just dead. So yeah, I've still got those usually lying around. So clear up the greenhouse so it's ready to stroll into in the spring. I'm not an early seed starter. I very much live by the theory of some of the early seeds, they do need an incredible amount of love. I don't have windowsills in my house. I'm not covering my living space with seeds. They will not get enough light because I don't have the window ledges. So yeah, it's I'm a March seed starter, and I have this theory that these things catch up. Right, they catch up, and there's a very few things that need such a long season. There are a few things. Peppers need a very long season. They need a lot of love and attention, but I never grow peppers from seeds. I always just buy a couple of plants, and that I'm quite happy with that. Can't really eat peppers anyway since I've had the kids. And what else requires a long season? Loofahs require a very long season because they need to dry out. I've never successfully grown one of them either, so I'm not too concerned. So yeah, just this time of year, it's just, harvesting a lot of the last things, and there's something about harvesting by hand, I think, whether it be on the balcony or at the allotment, that really makes you slow down and makes you appreciate the entire life cycle. It starts really early, and so one of the things I love to grow tomatoes. I've grown an incredible amount of different varieties this year, and they were amazing, and it was really fun. I really, really enjoy that. Now I know lots of people are probably like, oh, anybody grows tomatoes, and I love it. It's like a real sort of special interest of mine, I think, that I just really enjoy growing tomatoes. I enjoy eating tomatoes. I enjoy seeing what I'm going to get, what they look like, the different varieties. I just really enjoy it. And when you are harvesting a tomato off a plant that you have seen from seed all the way through. So I asked for Christmas, one of the things I asked for was lots of different tomato varieties. So it's such a long time coming when you're gardening, like to open those seeds at Christmas. And then I did some of the first planting. I did plant a few at home in one tiny space I have available, but it was complicated, let's say. And to plant those seeds, predominantly in the greenhouse, and see those first shoots, then the first true leaves, and then potting them on until, and tomatoes as well, they're very fussy. I don't put them out too early. I'm usually like a mid to late May when I plant them out, and constantly looking at temperatures. The overnight temperature is going to be good enough? Are they going to be okay? And it's like having another child. And putting them out and then seeing them thrive. For the most part, I have tomatoes in the ground at the allotment, but also I have some in pots on the balcony as well. And it's just you know, when you take a tomato off of the vine and like hold it in your hand, and then you just think like, this is a seed. I grew this from a seed. This isn't a packet on Christmas Day, and look where we are now. So yeah, there is something that really makes you appreciate almost every step of the journey. And so the allotment in autumn, like I said, is a lot of time of clearing and preparing. We pull out the old plants and compost them. We've got a massive composting area. We either cover the soil with cardboard and mulch to protect it through the winter. You know, we will turn some of the soil. So often I will put down some manure. I did chicken pellets last year. And just looking after the soil, thinking ahead, and just thinking, you know, or what will next year look like. And then obviously back on the balcony, it's, you know, just again taking out the old plants. We will maybe take them to we will take them to the allotment for composting and just clearing things away and just getting it ready for sort of the next season. I suppose as well, all of that aside, you know, everything that's going on the balcony and the allotment, once we've gathered all of this during harvest, whether it's from the allotment or the balcony or a mix of the both, you know, we shift into what I like to call seasonal kitchen mode. And this is my favourite part. And it's not about fancy cooking or aesthetic food. It's about making the most of what's fresh and what's seasonal and what we've got on hand. So we make big batches of soups and casseroles. You know, we'll use up our tomatoes. We make chutneys, like shelf-stable chutneys, and tomato purees. And, you know, throughout the summer, we're obviously harvesting them and having them with, you know, salads and stuff. And, you know, we'll use our root veg and roast them. We'll use our herbs, dry them out. We'll make spiced apple cake. We'll freeze our berries, and we just stock the freezer with bits and bobs to get us through. You know, it might be pesto from the balcony, basil that I've done, or, you know, frozen cubes of chopped herbs in olive oil. And it's just small scale preserving, but it really adds up. And I think there's this idea that you need this huge kitchen or a pantry the size of a shed to eat seasonally, but it's just not true. All you need is a few good ingredients and just a willingness to work with what you have. So my freezer is not massive. We did buy a small chest freezer as well. My storage space is really small. I live in a very small home. But every year we manage to tuck away a little taste of the season. And I just really love to pull out like a homemade sauce or a frozen bag of runner beans in January. And it feels like, you know, like a bit of a love letter from past me. And, you know, it's really easy. It doesn't have to be fancy, just real practical food that honours the season. So it could be tray bakes from the allotment in the autumn, you know, using our balcony herbs, making slow cooker casseroles with some of our root veg, or one pot pastas. And like I said, it's not about being fancy, it's about being intentional and about letting the season feed you. And also remembering that the food didn't just show up. It grew really slowly in soil that I tended, that I watered, and sometimes the rain watered as well. Or mostly Ray watered it, my husband actually. And that really matters. And, you know, it's really nice and just makes me grateful that we have this. But I also want my kids to grow up knowing that food has a story, that even in a flat that we are part of that story, and that harvesting isn't just for farmers, it's for all of us. We can all be part of that. And so if you're new to growing or you feel overwhelmed about the idea of starting, I promise you, just start small, and you can do it. I promise you. Everybody starts by planting their first seed or buying their first plant. And so as the season is turning, let your home and your cooking shift with it. whether it's food you've grown or buying seasonal food from the supermarket or the local farm shop, just let your meals reflect what's growing, and let your kitchen smell like cinnamon and root veg, and let yourself slow down enough to notice that growing and cooking and eating is all part of the same sacred rhythm. We're not here to chase the next season. We're here in this one. So whatever you're doing at the moment, whatever you're doing from your harvest or from seasonal food that you're purchasing, just choose seasonal and let it be a reminder that you are participating in a really, really ancient art, the very, very ordinary magic of autumn and the harvest. And I promise you, that is enough. I hope today's episode was helpful for you, and I would love to know what you have been harvesting, what you have been preserving, whether you grow anything in whether it be a small or big space, or whether you're going to start next year. I would love to know. You can find me over on Instagram at The Slow Living Collective, and you can also find me and this podcast and the show notes over on Substack. You can find me there, theslowlivingcollective.substack.com. Thank you again so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.